Okay, we're still heading downhill here, going pretty fast, so keep that cadence up. Keep that cadence up and that resistance at a moderate level that you can maintain a cadence somewhere around 85, 90 RPMs and in that aerobic intensity zone. Okay, keep it steady here. We're coming up to a turn. See that time, making a left towards Kauai High. Not a lot of turns on this course. And in a little ways, we'll be making a right turn up towards Hawi. But this is pretty fast downhill here, so you can get your cadence up a little bit. Again, though, you'll be climbing out of this as well on the way back. But you're still feeling pretty good. You've been on that bike now for around 2 hours. See the ocean up ahead. To keep that cadence up, I want to remind you the importance of your nutrition. Hopefully you're sticking to that nutrition strategy that you laid out for yourself. You still have several more hours to go in this workout. We're going downhill right now, so this is a pretty fast section as you head towards the ocean. And again, we're going to make a right turn as we head up to Hawi in a little bit. But this is a pretty fast section here. Whoa. Watch out for those trucks. Hope they see you. from the helmet cam as we come into town here. See the sign there, Hawi, 18 miles. And here we go, right turn. See the arrows on the road? Telling you exactly where to go. Hop out of the saddle here, you climb out of the saddle for a bit, stretch your legs out. Now we're heading up to Hawi. Watch out for this guy. Grabbing something to drink here. You should do the same. Passing this cyclist. Hey, buddy. He's wearing all black. He must be pretty hot. That dark clothing can really absorb the heat, so it's probably a good thing to wear lighter clothing out there, especially on race day. Here we go, headed up to Hawi. I mean, this part of the course isn't that difficult quite yet, but it definitely will kick up to a nice steady grade for roughly 7 or 8 miles. And the big issue and concern are the winds. They can be pretty severe some years, gusting 40 miles per hour. Crosswinds too, where you can literally see people leaning sideways on their bike heading back down the hill. It's pretty amazing. And I've seen people blown over into the other lane of traffic, so you have to be really careful in this section of road. But every year is different, but for the most part you can count on it being very windy on this part of the island. In fact, you can see a lot of the vegetation as we get further up. A lot of the vegetation is actually bent in one particular direction because it's been subjected to the winds. So now that we are climbing up towards Hawi, let's go into a harder gear inch. So whatever you're in right now, let's increase the resistance on your trainer by using your gears, or if you're on a spin bike or some other stationary bike, increase that resistance slightly, and let's put out a little bit more effort. So let's let the power output go up. Let the heart rate start going up. You can see the ocean there on the left. But this is definitely a more difficult part of this course. So let's start riding a little bit harder on the trainer to simulate this effort. But I still want you to keep your cadence in that sweet spot range, in the mid 80 RPM range, but just increase your resistance, and therefore your metabolic costs will go up. You'll be working a little bit harder here as you would be out there on the course itself. You can clearly tell we're not going very fast right now. So speeds are down because this grade is really starting to kick up. Come on now, stay on my wheel. Stay on my wheel. Let's maintain your focus, maintain your intensity. A little bit of shade there. You don't get a lot of shade, but we just had some shade. Full second of it. Not a whole lot going on out here as we climb towards Hawi. Not a lot of traffic. Hawi is a little town. There's your perspective from the helmet cam. The roads are still nice, nicely paved, smooth. Now, depending where you are in your training cycle, your progression, getting ready for your big race, you might actually want to hop off the bike when you're done this workout and go for a run. Do a good brick workout. Solid 5+ hours on the bike, followed by a 30-minute up to an hour run. That is a good day of training. Keep your cadence up. You can see the road is definitely tilted up a little bit here. When we videotaped this particular video, it was the week before the race in 2010 in October, and I was just coming off a broken collarbone and broken rib incident where I crashed in Leadville, Colorado for the Leadville Trail 100 mountain bike race in August, and had gone through surgery and was basically just a couple weeks back on the bike and training, getting ready then for the Ironman Arizona race in November. So I had good base fitness, but I wasn't in great shape. So this was a tough ride for me as I was getting myself back into shape and getting ready for Ironman Arizona, which was about 6 to 7 weeks after we videotaped this. But it was kind of uncomfortable. The first time I'd been riding on the aero bars for quite a while, and I was plated and pinned in the collarbone, so it was kind of an uncomfortable ride for me. But I'm not complaining. It was good to get back on the bike. It's good to be able to actually race again, because I thought my year was over. I was able to bring it back. I had a good surgeon, put me back together. Let's keep your cadence up right now and let's maintain your focus. Big chainring on the front, maybe around your 15 or so on the back. If you're riding a spinner bike or other stationary bike, put that resistance on a 3 on that scale from 1, which is really easy, to 5, which is really hard. And just keep that cadence in that sweet spot, mid 80 RPM range. Still just keeping it steady. Again, you can see the road up ahead, tilting up, so get ready for that. If you want to go to a slightly harder gear inch, you can do that just to simulate the road as it does kick up. Your cadence might drop a little bit, but I'd like to see you maintain your cadence and let your effort just increase to do so. But I want you to stay aerobic. I don't want you getting into that lactate threshold range for this workout. That's for another day. By the way, if you're a social networker, make sure that you do visit us on Facebook. We do have a Spinnervals page on Facebook, so you can search for us. Let's hop out of the saddle here. You can see how the road goes pretty steep. So get out of the saddle, stretch your legs out. Stay with me, stay with me. There you go. But yeah, visit us on Facebook. And then if you're also a Twitter user, we have a Twitter account as well. Hey, buddy. What was that guy doing? Pretty steep section here, it would seem. So stay out of your saddle. Climb with me. Coming up on another rider. Boy, they're easy to see from far away. Wearing lime green. Good stuff, good stuff. Hey, bud. This guy's camelback too. That's smart. That's pretty smart. He's all set with hydration. That is the way to go. Still keeping it steady. Come on now, stay with me. Don't get bored. I'm reaching back and grabbing my bottle. Take a swig, put it back. Keep it steady as we still are climbing. Just a gradual uphill grind now. You have to get your head around this because it's definitely a tough part of this course. This is where people start regretting if they went out too hard on the early stages of the bike. This is where it really starts to separate the athletes who were smart, had a good strategy, and those who didn't. So hopefully you're feeling pretty good right now as we're around 2.5 hours into our ride. Come on, keep it steady. Stay on my wheel. We're in this together. 112 miles today. You can't quit until we're done. Keep it steady. You can see we're still climbing. So keep it in that same gear. If you're starting to get tired, you see your heart rate drift up too much into your lactate threshold range or in the upper range of that zone 3 aerobic endurance zone, you might want to back it off a little bit, go to a slightly easier gear, because I don't want you to get up there too high yet. We still have a long day to go. There's some riders on the other side of the road heading back down. They're heading back in. They're lucky. We still have a ways to go. You see the coastline to the left. It's interesting. Some days it's raining up in Hawi and there's no rain in Kona. And that's happened several years of the race as well. It'll be raining. You'll get a break. Nice and steady. Keep that cadence up nice and high. There's another rider. Hey, bud. It's amazing. You'll be riding up this hill on race day and you'll see the top pros coming back and they will be cranking on their aero bars. And you wonder how they do it, because those winds can be so severe, those cross winds, you know, buffeting you at 40-mile-per-hour gusts and just threatening to blow you off the bike. And they're all riding down on their aero bars as if nothing's happening, cruising along at 28 miles per hour. It's pretty cool. Riding nice and steady as we head up to Hawi in the turnaround. Stay with me here. Nobody quits until we're done. There will be consequences if you do. Beautiful day today, very few clouds. You see the ocean on the left once again. Viewpoint from the helmet cam. going pretty fast. We've got a good clip going here, probably around 20 miles per hour. I don't know about yours, but my legs are getting a little bit tired right about now. It's hot out there, getting dehydrated, a little bit of cardiac drift, so the heart rate's going up just to maintain the same power output or the same metabolic output.
35 miles per hour uphill into a headwind. Just kidding.
Nice and steady, everyone. Maintain your interest somehow. If it's cranking up your music a little bit louder, or it's turning on TV while you're watching the video, whatever it needs to be, you gotta stay engaged and focused. These long, steady state rides like this aren't always the most exciting. Certainly not as exciting as a hard interval session where you have a lot of different sets, a lot of different jumps. But that's the nature of this kind of training. It's just steady state endurance training. What you have to do. It's part of the sport. It's part of the kind of training you need to do if you want to get better, be good at this stuff. Ultra distance aerobic endurance work like this needs to get done, as well as the shorter, higher intensity work, in order to be a well-balanced athlete and develop all your various skill sets. And by doing so, you'll be a better rider. But you have to get used to this, both physically and mentally. Just the monotony of it is sometimes difficult mentally, but it's an important part of the game that you have to play. And if you're not good at it, you need to get yourself good at it. You need to train it. It's like any muscle. You got to work your mental muscle. That's why you need to go on those rides sometimes on your own. Just keep it steady. Come on, keep it steady. Don't forget your nutrition. Hydrate, take in some calories. Stay with me. Remember, don't burn through your matches too quickly. We want to hold on to those matches. Everyone's got a matchbook, and everyone's matchbook is going to be a different size depending on your genetics and your fitness level. Just make sure you don't burn through those matches too quickly. And remember, you still have to run a marathon when you're done this bike ride. Keep it steady. If you have to, let's stand up. Stand up, get out of the saddle, stretch your legs out a little bit. cyclist. Right now it's going downhill a little bit, so you can crank up your cadence slightly. It's going to kick back up, but right now I want you to go to slightly easier gear and get your cadence up a little bit. Change it up a little bit. Get that cadence in the 90 RPM range, maybe up 10 or so RPMs from where you've been for the past hour. Spin the legs out a little bit. There you go. Try to get that cadence up. Always thinking about your good form. Keep your upper bodies nice and relaxed. Let your legs do the work. Looks like the road's kicking up a little bit here, just slightly. And you can see me shifting to a slightly easier gear to maintain my cadence and my output nice and steady. Stay down those aero bars. Make sure you're taking in some fluids. I just took a drink there. Make sure you're doing the same thing. Sticking to your nutrition strategy, whatever that might be, every 15 or 20 minutes. As we head up to Hawi on this beautiful day in Kona, along the Kona coastline, the big island of Hawaii. Rolling our way up to Hawi here. You can see I'm down in my aero bars. So even though this is a slight uphill grade and typically into a headwind, you can still get down on the aero bars and stay nice and low and aerodynamic. So on your trainer at home, practice riding in your aero bar position. I mean, it's really important to get used to being in that position for extended periods of time. And the only way to get good at that, of course, is to train in that position. So just get down on those bars. and if it's a little bit uncomfortable, you just need to train yourself. And if it's very uncomfortable, then you need to look at bike fit and proper bike fit, and you might want to look into getting yourself fit with a professional fit at your local shop, or find a shop nearby that does a really good job. You can get on the internet and find some different opportunities with regard to bike fit, but finding someone who is certified in one way or another, who has a good reputation, especially working with triathletes and aerodynamic fitting on tri-bikes. I think that's really important for anybody who's taking the sport seriously. So make sure you do that, but get used to riding that aero position, get down those bars, try to get low, try to get narrow, and always think about your good form. Most athletes can benefit from riding in the aero position even when they are going up a slight hill, because they're going to be a little bit more aerodynamic, especially if they're fit properly and biomechanically they're efficient and able to transfer power efficiently and effectively while riding in the aero position. Right now I'm up on the cow horns, as you can see my hand. But this is a training ride. If this was race day for me, I would be more disciplined in staying down in the aero bars as much as possible, with changing hand position and changing from being seated to getting out of the saddle periodically, just to keep everything loose and to stay stretched out. Now we're climbing a little bit steeper grade here, so if you want to go to a heavier gear, go to your big chain ring, maybe down to your 12 on the back, and get out of the saddle here with me. Climb out of the saddle, and if you're on a spin bike, then crank up that resistance to a 4 or 5. Hop out of the saddle, change out the muscle groups a little bit, stretch your legs out a little bit, and then have a seat again, get back down on those aero bars as soon as you can. You can see the road kind of turns down, or at least levels out coming up. So get down on those aero bars again if you can. There's a cyclist on the other side. And look at that road way up ahead. You can see it's going to be tilting back up again here shortly. So getting that rhythm, big chain ring on the front, maybe you're 15 on the back. Cadence in the sweet spot range, typically in the mid 80s for most people. That's where I want you right now. This is a steady state aerobic endurance ride. So dial in that heart rate, dial in that effort. You've been on the bike now for a while, so fatigue is going to start setting in, so expect that. But you know, the magic happens when the body's fatigued. So when you're doing a long aerobic endurance ride like this, the first 2 to 3 hours are basically just getting you ready for those last couple hours you're on the bike when things get more difficult. And that's where the big training effect comes in. Hawi, 7 miles, you saw the sign. So keep that in mind. You know, those first couple hours, first few hours, you're just getting the body warmed up. The magic happens when you're tired. And when the legs are getting tired, that's when you're going to start seeing the benefits required for this kind of racing. Anybody can feel good at 2 hours on the bike, or even 3 hours on the bike. That's why racing the half or the 70.3 distance is so different from racing the Ironman distance. You have to have a different mindset and a slightly different training program for each in order to do each effectively. There's an old saying that I remember many years ago hearing, and that is pee before Hawi. And basically that says that you better be hydrating well enough that you have to pee at least once before you get up to Hawi in the turnaround. So that's roughly, we'll say 50 miles or so into the bike, or 2.5 to 3 hours. Try to be hydrating yourself well enough that you have to pee before Hawi. Keep in mind too, when you're out there in the water swimming hard for whatever it is for you, 2.4 miles might be an hour, or it might be an hour and a half. it might be 2 hours, you're sweating a lot, especially in this water, because we're talking about ocean where temperatures probably around upper 70s, 80-degree range, and you're swimming hard with a moderately high heart rate for that hour or so. You know, you're already in a dehydration state. So once you get on the bike and all of a sudden it's 80 some degrees with high humidity and gets hotter, and you can see that asphalt, you know, it's hot out there, and your sweat rate's very high when you're out here in the lava fields. So don't underestimate the need for lots of fluid as well as lots of electrolytes so you don't cramp. But you want to make sure you're consuming enough fluid out there, this Ironman or anyone for that matter, that you have to urinate at least once, probably by midway on the bike. That's a good gauge. And some coaches will even say 2 times on the bike, which is probably good for a lot of people, and then drink enough that you have to pee once or twice on the run as well, because it's a long day out there and you want to be consuming plenty of fluid. I know that I'm a heavy sweater, and I've made the mistake of not drinking enough at times, and I have lost 7 to 10 pounds during the course of an Ironman in fluid weight alone, even though I thought I was hydrating properly. So you have to find out what your sweat rate is and start determining your fluid needs based on your sweat rate. There's a lot of ways to do that. You can Google it, and I'm sure you'll find a method that suits your needs. But we're rolling up the road here towards Hawi. You're still down the aero bars, just cranking it out, thinking of your good form, riding right in that sweet spot at your steady aerobic pace. There's the helmet cam. You can see the ocean over to the left. Not a whole lot going on out here. Not what most people think of Hawaii, I'm sure, when they think of the vacation areas of Hawaii. But for any triathlete, this is a special place. You stay down those aero bars, maintain that good form. Good job. Stay on my wheel here, stay on my wheel. I'm sure you can tell I'm moving around a little bit on the bike in terms of the winds are buffeting me from the side, so you can see the bike is going back and forth, and that's not ideal. Ideally you'll be following a straight line, but sometimes the winds make you move around a little bit more than you want. But try to hold a straight line when you're riding this kind of course. Steady aerobic pace. Again, choose a gearing where you can dial in to your sweet spot range of around mid 80 RPMs and maintain that nice aerobic heart rate, and whatever that is, or power output, whatever way you train, whether it's power, heart rate, or even perceived effort. Just get in that aerobic endurance range, high aerobic I would say. So that's where you're working moderately hard. You're not cranking it out to the point that you can't sustain it, but you're not going so easy that you have a very low heart rate either. For me, this is around, heart rate wise, probably around 135, 140 beats per minute. And then for power, I'm probably looking at around 200 to 220 watts right now, just a steady state pace. steady state aerobic pace. On race day, it might be a little bit higher for me as far as an average power output goes, but not a whole lot, because again, after racing so many years at Ironman, I've made my mistakes, and I know the biggest mistake you can make is to take out the bike too hard, to be too aggressive on the bike, and to treat the bike as if it's a bike race when it's not. It's a triathlon. So you have to conserve. Keep in mind you have 26 miles to run after the bike, and successful Ironman distance athletes run well. There's no doubt about it. So in Kona every year, at every Ironman every year at the higher levels, you'll see the athletes crank out sub 440 bike splits, which is it's incredible. That's a fast bike split. Lots of power, lots of endurance, just lots of athleticism. But then they end up running 3.5, 4 hours, which is a great marathon. But at that level, a lot of these guys, I bet you if they backed off 5 minutes on the bike, they'd probably run 3 hours on the run, and all of a sudden end up a lot faster on the day and a place a lot higher up. So you have to manage your pace on the bike. And remember too, however you feel right now, if you feel great, it really doesn't matter, because what counts is how you feel later in the day. Not how you feel at 3 or 4 hours into the race, but how you feel at 6 hours, 7 hours, 9 hours. And what you do right now has a direct impact on how you're going to feel later on in the day. So manage your nutrition, manage your pacing, and you're going to be passing a lot of people later in the day who did not do that. Helmet cam perspective here, looking at the road. Again, nothing too exciting out there, so you have to stay focused at all times. You have to stay mentally engaged with what you're doing, because if you don't, your cadence will drop, your effort will drop, and your speed will drop. Stay engaged. Do what you need to do to keep your mind in the game, which is fairly easy to do up here, simply because you're managing the bike, and with the winds, you have to consciously work pretty hard, especially going up this hill. I mean, this is not an easy hill, so you're working pretty hard just to get up this hill, and then the winds are challenging you at the same time. Not to mention the heat, humidity, and everything else. coming into town a little bit here, so some residential housing. A little bit more interesting now to look at. Not a whole lot more, but a little bit. As we come into the town of Hawi up here. There's a cyclist on the other side of the road out for a training ride. Hey, buddy. Still just rolling up here. Still going uphill. Slight uphill grade. So maintain that steady effort. You know, you can keep that resistance on your bike trainer up a little bit. Stay in that sweet spot. Cadence range, whatever that might be for you. That's going to be different for everybody, by the way. I spoke to an athlete the other day, a really good athlete, in fact, who said that they typically ride comfortably in the low 90 RPM range. So it's going to be different for everybody. I'm typically in that low 80 RPM range. If I go on a ride and I get back, and just a steady ride, I'll usually average around 82 to 83 RPMs as an average cadence for a typical, say, 2-hour ride. So it varies for everybody. I know some people who like to mash the beer gears and they'll average low to mid 70s. So there's no right or wrong way. It's all a matter of individual preference. But the research tends to show that the more accomplished and successful cyclists tend to be in that mid to upper 80 RPM range in many cases. Looks like you're coming into town here a little bit, but still maintain your effort, maintain your focus. On race day, you see a lot of the athletes coming back the other way who are in front of you. So it's this is a pretty cool area, and you'll actually see them as you're climbing Hawi, of course, depending on where you are on the course. In the old days, when the pros went off with the age groupers, there's just more cyclists on the other side. It was a lot closer. Everything was bunched together more. But nowadays, that the pros go off before the age groupers, you'll see a lot of the pros coming down the hill, pretty far down the hill, in fact, and some will even see them back on the Queen K because the gap is so large. But here we are coming into town. We're going downhill here, so if you want to spin your legs out a little bit of recovery, if you will, go ahead. Coming into the town of Hawi. Quaint little town, not a whole lot going on, but again, it means a lot to the triathlon world, as this is the turnaround for the Ironman. Here we go. Now we're heading back. Alright, now we're going to go into our descent. So it's not all descent, of course. There's some areas where it flattens out, might even kick up a little bit, but for the most part there is a descent. And this is where things get really kind of sketchy and hairy out there on race day. You can see the wind, the trees there, how much the wind is blowing. The wind is really pretty severe up here and can gust. I've been out here on the race day where the winds will gust at over 40 miles per hour. And it's kind of scary, even for an experienced cyclist. It's a little bit nerve-wracking when you're out there and all of a sudden you're just getting buffeted by these winds. So you need to be careful out there. Sometimes you need to get your hands on those cow horns for a little bit greater stability. You'll see a lot of the really accomplished cyclists riding in their air bars no matter what down this hill, but it's going to get windy, so get ready. But we are going downhill, so I want you to go to a gearing where your cadence might be a little bit higher, maybe 5 RPMs higher, and a little bit easier to turn the cranks. So slightly less resistance, get that cadence up a bit. So we're going pretty fast already, you can tell. But look at those winds. I mean, if you look at those trees carefully, you can see how the winds are already picking up, and you don't get any protection there from the winds as they come off the coast. The ocean's to your right. Going pretty fast here. Nice rate of speed, over 25 miles per hour. Getting down on those aero bars again. Nice steady state effort, getting that sweet spot cadence range. Keep that cadence in that upper 80 RPM range if you can, and that aerobic endurance intensity somewhere around, we're going to say on our intensity scale, that's typically going to be between 75 and 80% for most of us. So you can read that however you will. Some people will say that's percentage of heart rate at lactate threshold. Some people will say that's percentage of functional threshold power on the bike. Some will say that's just a perceived effort measurement, where 85 to 90% might be time trialing a 40K, 75% might be doing an Ironman distance effort, 65% might be just out on an easy spin, and 90 to 95% might be a really hard short interval. So it just really depends on how you read it. But for me, it's the steady, moderate pace where you're capable of sustaining it for a long, long time, but you're working, your heart rate's up, you're getting a good training effect from the effort while not wasting yourself. That's where you kind of want to be right now. You can see the land is opened up. There's no protection out there whatsoever. And that's what makes this race so difficult. No protection from the wind, no protection from the heat and the sun. You're just fully exposed. If you're lucky on race day, it'll be raining in Hawi at least a little bit, cooling things down, or maybe you'll have some cloud cover, but there's no way to tell. It's different every year. Coming up on some cyclists here. On your left, on your left. On your left. Out there training, getting ready. Love it. We're going at a pretty good clip here. You can see we're cruising along at probably around 35 miles per hour. So get down on those air bars. Pretend you're going with me while you're on the trainer. Pretend you're cruising with me. Get that cadence up. Stay near my wheel. Stay within legal riding though. That would be several bike lengths behind me. And triathlon, as many of you know who are watching this, you can't draft. So don't let the marshal pull you over. Stay legal. Cruising down this hill. I'm staying pretty steady there. You can see my bike's not all over the place just now, just yet. So the winds must not be as bad as they can be. One thing for sure though, when you're descending a hill like this pretty fast, you want to make sure your weight is evenly distributed over the bike. Some people will tend to pull back a little bit, but you want to make sure that front wheel is weighted. So kind of keep your weight evenly distributed over the rear wheel, you know, at the saddle and also towards the front if you can. I mean, you'll never be able to get a 50-50, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you want to maintain some downward force or pressure or weight on those aero bars so that your front wheel maintains a steep hill like this with buffeting crosswinds. The other thing you want to consider when doing a race like this is your wheel selection. You know, most athletes, of course, will ride a deep dish aerodynamic wheel, which is great. I've ridden a bunch of different types in the past, including carbon, tri-spoke type wheels, and traditional spoked, and deep dish rims, and everything else. I've always found that if you're more conservative and you're more conservative, especially with the front wheel, and you're not so concerned about getting the most aerodynamic wheel, you're going to find the bike handles better than if you're looking at, you know, the most aerodynamic wheel possible. The problem with that is, especially if you're not a really accomplished bike handling rider, you just get thrown around a lot. You can get pretty nervous out there, and that can slow you down because you tighten up. So if you're not really confident in your riding abilities and you've never experienced buffeting winds, crosswinds at 40 miles per hour, you might want to consider bringing a regular, slightly deep dish rim with more traditional spokes than some of the more aerodynamic wheels out there on the market for at least the front. The back doesn't so much matter because most of your weight is distributed over the back of the bike, and that wheel obviously doesn't turn. So the impact of crosswinds are not as great. So the rear wheel, ride with whatever you want. Of course, out here you can't ride a disc on race day. You have to ride a wheel with it's not a disc. Still cruising down. I think the winds have picked up. You saw I was off the aero bars there for a bit. So I'm holding on for dear life as those winds are throwing me around. You can see the bike moving around a lot too. So you can change your hand position there on the trainer. Like I mentioned before, you want to shake things up a little bit, keep yourself loose. Don't overuse any particular muscle group in any particular position without switching it up every once in a while. Right here we're going uphill, so why don't you hop out of the saddle. If you want to increase the resistance on your bike, why don't you do that? Get out of the saddle a bit. Stay with me here out of the saddle as we climb this slight grade. It'll go back down, but we're just climbing a little bit here as we head down the hill out of Hawi. Nice steady rhythm out of the saddle. And have a seat, and let's get down on those air bars again as soon as you can. Make sure you're drinking, taking in your fluids, maintaining your good form throughout. Back down those aero bars. Looks like we have some cloud cover now, which is nice, believe me. And then we're riding right back into the sun. So that didn't last very long. That's okay. Make sure you wear your sunscreen when you're in Hawaii. I'm riding our Spinnerable cycling kit. If anybody's interested in getting a kit that looks something similar to this, we change it out every year. But if you're interested in getting one of our cycling uniforms or team uniforms for cycling or triathlon or even training, make sure you visit our website, coachtroy.com or spinnerables.com. We can get your size, you can order what you need, and we usually get it to you if we have it in stock right away. If not, typically in 6 to 10 weeks. And I'm riding my Kestrel carbon fiber bike. Kestrel is one of the original carbon fiber manufacturers. And they make a fantastic bike. So if you're in the market, you should definitely look for a local Kestrel dealer or get online and do some of your due diligence and see what they have to offer. We're still going pretty fast downhill. You can see the road just tilts down. So keep that cadence up. Keep that resistance moderate. This is wide open, exposed land here, and you can actually see the trees are bending in the prevailing direction of the winds, which is pretty interesting. A lot of the grasses do the same thing up here in Hawi, or that general area, this part of the island. As I mentioned before, hopefully you've gone to the bathroom. You've had to pee at least once or twice to ensure proper hydration. And the big question is, how do you do that when you're on a bike? Do you hop off the bike or do you just do it on the bike? Well, the answer is it depends on what your race goals are. If your goal is to finish and just to be comfortable as possible, I'd suggest get off the bike and hit one of the porta potties that are at the aid stations, which are roughly every 10 to 15 miles. That usually takes care of it. But if you're a competitive athlete and you're out there competing against yourself, trying to set a PR or against others, there's really no time to get off the bike, because by the time you stop that forward momentum, you get off the bike, you jump into the porta potty, you remove your garments or whatever you need to do, take care of business, then you get back on the bike and get back up to speed. You can have 2 minutes, 3 minutes gone by, and that's a lot of time. And not only that, there's momentum, psychological and physical momentum that you're losing. So a lot of the top performers out there and a lot of the competitive age group athletes will just basically go on the bike. So it depends on what your race goals are as to how you want to handle going to the bathroom out there. And that's all we'll get into that discussion topic right now. We won't be demonstrating how to do that in this ride. Make sure you hydrate. Still heading downhill here. Keep that cadence up. Okay, still cruising along here. Just keep that cadence nice and steady. Let's talk a little bit about training volume. You know, there are different philosophies regarding training for the Ironman distance and how to do it properly. And of course, there are the high volume people that put in a load of time, huge loads of time, and it's not uncommon to hear about Ironman distance triathletes putting in 400 to 500 mile weeks on the bike, 60 to 80 mile weeks worth of running, and then 20,000 meters worth of swimming. Those are usually people that don't have other jobs or responsibilities outside of training, and they do it for a living. Not to mention the fact that they have a great ability to recover from putting in those kinds of miles, just huge miles. And there's a lot of people who do that. Even in the age groups, it's surprising to see or hear about how many people are putting in just incredible volumes of training. On the other hand, you have people who put in a mixture of volume and intensity, and that tends to be where I fall in the spectrum, where you have a moderately high level of training volume, but you also have intensity mixed in. For myself, I know that I can't handle a lot of volume or I'll break down. That's the way I've always been, not to mention the fact I don't have time to put in a lot of volume. So I try to mix a good deal of intensity in with the higher volume work I can do. And even my high volume work probably isn't high volume as compared to a lot of athletes that I would compete against. But it really depends on the athlete and what they want to do and how their life is set up. But I find that most age group athletes can compete effectively at the Ironman distance with that combination of volume and intensity that fits into their normal lives, where they work, they have families, and they train for triathlon. Triathlon doesn't have to be a sport that consumes 100% of the athlete. I know it can if you're not careful, but it doesn't have to turn into that. Training for an Ironman distance race can be possible, and you can establish some balance. It'll take some sacrifice, especially during your key or your peak volume training weeks, where you need to be more selfish and put in a little bit more training time. But Ironman is sort of a year-round training process. You're not preparing specifically for the event year-round, but you're always staying in good shape. And if you're always in good shape and you're training in the three sports, the three sport disciplines, then when you do ramp up your training, your body's ready for it immediately, and then it can take a little jump up in fitness pretty quickly. But I see a lot of athletes who really overdo it. They read programs from the pros and they think that 35-hour weeks of training should be the norm. And that just isn't the case, or can't be the case for most people. I find that most age group athletes can prepare very effectively and race very well on peak weeks of upwards of 20 hours of training, which, let's face it, that's a lot of time. That's a part-time job that you're fitting into the rest of your busy lives. You'll find some elite age groupers who manage their schedules and make triathlon training a priority, that will train 25 to 30 hours a week during peak weeks. So it just really depends on the individual. I'm usually in that 15 to 20 hour range as I build for a race like an Ironman. And if I can, I'll get in a couple 100-mile rides, but normally they're more in the range of 4 hours, or say roughly 80 miles. I find that with my base of training after all these years, that's enough to get me by. And if I do a whole lot more, I tend to get hurt from overuse or just age or whatever you want to call it. My parts are wearing out. I don't want to abuse them too much more than I have to. But sometimes more is not always better. Keep that in mind. You have to strike that balance. And recovery is important, and the older you get, the more apparent it is that recovery is important. So I've mentioned this before in different articles, but some masters athletes will actually go on a 10 to 14 day microcycle as opposed to a week, which is more typical, obviously. But so in other words, instead of doing one intense workout over a 7-day period per sport, they might do one intense workout or one long workout every 10 days to even 14 days. And the other days are built in as recovery or different focus for each workout. But the workouts that really tear the body down are spread out a little bit more to allow for more recovery. So there's a lot of different ways to set up a training plan, and it's up to the athlete to experiment a little bit with the help of a coach ideally and figure out what works best for them, because what works best for athlete A probably won't work best for athlete B. Okay, keep it steady here. It's going to pop in every once in a while just to remind you of some things. Let's focus on your good form. Keep your legs close to that top tube if possible, tracking right over those pedal spindles for good power transfer. Let's keep your upper body nice and relaxed. Keep that cadence up in that sweet spot range. We are still heading down the hill. You can see we're heading down the hill from Hawi, and our pace is just steady, high aerobic. You're just dialing it in, dial it in. Watch the scenery go by, get a sense of what it's like out there. Right now I'm standing up, so why don't you follow my lead here and stand up and stretch it out a little bit. Stretch it out, stretch it out, stretch it out. Get back down those air bars. Heading down the hill here, you can tell how steep it is. It's actually harder to recognize how steep it is heading up the hill than it is when you're descending. You see that flag over there to the left? How it looked like the winds were coming off the coast. So we definitely have a side wind right now. We're cruising, we're going pretty fast. Again, probably mid 30 mile per hour range right now, or low 30s. Wish we could do this all day. Keep it steady, keep that cadence up, keep your good form. Okay, hop out of the saddle here, stretch your legs out, crank it up to a slightly higher resistance if you wish. Maintain that steady state effort here. Switch it up a little bit though. Stretch those legs out. Keep it steady. Still flying downhill, going pretty fast. Keep that cadence up in that mid to upper 80 RPM range. Maintain your form. Make sure you're taking in some fluids. You have a long ways to go. Okay, we're going to be making a left turn up here. Gonna roll around these cars. Clear right, clear left, and we're through. Hey, bud. Alright, we're rolling up. Gonna be heading back up to the Queen K Highway now. This is a climb, so get ready for that. Let's go to a higher resistance, and your cadence might drop just a little bit, but I want a slightly higher resistance on the trainer or on the bike. Okay, stay with me here. Still maintaining that nice steady cadence. Get down those aero bars. Get down those aero bars. Hold on to that good form. And again, make sure you're taking in some calories, taking in some fluids. Let's get out of the saddle here like I am. Stay with me. Go to a slightly harder gear inch right here. More resistance. Pop out of the saddle and climb with me as we head up. Head uphill just for a little bit. And have a seat. This is where a lot of athletes who went a little bit too hard out to Hawi and were able to cruise down the hill, getting by with the fact that it is downhill and going pretty fast. That's where a lot of athletes tend to start getting themselves into some trouble. Been on the bike now for a few hours and the wear and tear is starting to kick in. The layers of the onion are starting to get peeled off a little bit. And when we turn back up, turn right, coming up here back onto the Queen K, all of a sudden you're faced with a stretch of road that's rolling, has some steady little climbs, and on a bad day the winds can be pretty severe and they can be headwinds, and that's not a fun way to finish the Ironman bike for sure. Let's get out of the saddle here like I am. Stay with me. Go to a slightly harder gear inch right here. More resistance. Pop out of the saddle and climb with me as we head up. Head uphill just for a little bit. Okay, stay with me here. Still maintaining that nice steady cadence. Get down those aero bars. Get down those aero bars. Hold on to that good form. And again, make sure you're taking in some calories, taking in some fluids. taking a drink. See, the road kicks up a little bit here, so we're still pushing a slightly higher resistance. So you can be in your big chain ring on the front, maybe your 13s or 15 on the back, and if you're on a spinner bike, keep that resistance at a 3 or 4, and keep your cadence range right in that sweet spot, 80 to 90 RPMs. You see a sign coming up here? Kailua, 24 miles. Making a right turn up here. To me, on race day, this is a good spot because you know you're heading home. You're heading home. At least for the bike leg. Here we go. Downhill a little bit so you can lower that resistance ever so slightly. Let's get that cadence up a little bit. Get back down those aero bars. That was just a tough climb we did, believe it or not. That was not an easy climb. So we're rolling back, rolling back. Like I said, depending on the year, you could be faced with pretty severe headwinds all the way back into town. Or some years you can have a tailwind. Just really depends. You never know what you're going to get. So you have to be mentally prepared for anything and ready to deal with it. But you should know it's going to be hot, it's going to be humid, and you've got 26.2 miles to run when you get off. So hopefully you've saved a lot of matches in your match book. Let's keep it steady here. You're down your aero bars and you're just keeping it steady. Not a whole lot going on otherwise. Now you're just really managing your hydration, managing your nutrition, keeping that nice steady pace. You might find that your heart rate, depending on where you are and how your fitness levels are right now, is at a very steady rate. Some people who are getting muscular fatigue might find their heart rate is dropping. Just really depends on where you are in your training cycle. But in any event, make sure that you're just maintaining a nice, steady paced effort right now as we head back to town, back to Kailua on the Queen K Highway. For many of you doing this workout at home as a long aerobic endurance day, you need to look at the workouts prior to this one and the workouts you'll do tomorrow and how they'll impact this key workout, because this is one of the key workouts of the week. And in many cases you want to come into a workout like this fully prepared and ready to have a quality effort. So that might mean the day before you either ride easy or maybe you don't ride at all, focus on one of the other sports or both of the other sports. But my recommendation typically is don't come into this long key workout with really tired legs. Fatigued legs from cumulative training is okay, but I wouldn't come into this workout with super tired legs. Tomorrow, because volume does equal intensity, and this is a high volume ride by any standard, tomorrow should probably be a recovery day, at least on the bike. For many of you triathletes out there, your schedule will have you run long tomorrow, and I think that's fine, depending again where you are in your training cycle. But for the bike, I would suggest letting your body recover and either do an easy spin to shake the legs out or even take a day off the bike. So it really depends on the individual, but those are my recommendations. You see we're going downhill here again, so let's lighten up that resistance ever so slightly and bring that cadence up a little bit.